Hello and welcome to Midday Report, coming to you live from Warsaw. I'm Zaporizhzhia. European Union foreign ministers are meeting in Brussels for high-level talks on Ukraine, the Middle East and a fresh round of sanctions against Russia. The EU is also moving ahead with a new package of sanctions against Iran. Our correspondent Alex Kyiv is following the talks in Brussels. Hello, Alex. So what outcomes are we still expecting and what was established so far?
Well, good afternoon. The clear priority or the clear headline from this meeting so far is that the IRGC, the Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps, will be placed on the European Union's terrorist list. That was signed off by the foreign ministers. We heard the French foreign minister, Jean-Noël Barrot, talking about the fact that there can be no impunity for the brutal crackdown we have seen across Iran by the Iranian government, and therefore these European ministers putting this in place, putting the IRGC on the terrorist list of the European Union. Now, that will be largely symbolic, but at least it sends a clear message about the unified position here in Brussels. We also heard from the Polish Foreign Minister, Radosław Sikorski, looking at ways to put more pressure on Russia this time for its brutal attacks against Ukrainian civilians and energy infrastructure, as we've seen for the last few days. One question is about Russian oil refineries, and this is what the minister had to say.
I will raise the issue of the need to impose sanctions on refineries that process Russian oil. In my opinion, this would complement the sanctions that we have on the Russian scrap fleet.
So that is one aspect. The other aspect, of course, we've heard from Estonia a few weeks ago, banning soldiers that had served in the Russian armed forces against Ukraine from entering Estonia. That prompted a debate, a question about whether or not Russian veterans should be banned from entering the European Union altogether. On that, Radosław Sikorski also had a view.
It's something to be considered, although, on the other hand, some of these gentlemen may be accused of war crimes. So perhaps it would be good if they stepped foot on our soil.
So clearly, the Polish Foreign Minister saying there that it may be better to have those troops or veterans coming into the European Union because they can be arrested and tried for their war crimes. That debate, Sally, will continue about exactly whether or not a European-wide ban for all Russian visa entries or former soldiers or generals or officials will continue to be debating, but clearly slapping more sanctions on Iran, discussing more sanctions on Russia, Sally.
Alex Kyiv, much appreciated. Thank you. And now for the latest from Ukraine. 3 people have been killed in the Zaporizhzhia region in overnight Russian strikes as Moscow continues to target civilian areas and energy infrastructure. Meanwhile, Warsaw is continuing its support for Kyiv. A new batch of Polish power generators is set to arrive in the war-torn country later on Thursday.
Russia's overnight strikes on Ukraine targeted residential buildings, local infrastructure and the country's power grid. In Zaporizhzhia, 3 people were killed. As of Wednesday evening, more than 700 homes in Ukraine's capital Kyiv were left without heating.
It's very hard to live without electricity. It makes you want to cry. The thermometer there shows 3 degrees. In the morning, it was 2. If it's 4 degrees in here now, I don't know. It will be -20 outside soon. It will be a disaster and people won't survive. They won't endure it.
In response to the crisis, emergency shelters offering heat, electricity, water and other facilities have popped up across Ukraine. They're called points of invincibility.
There is absolutely no possibility of any alternative heating. People started coming yesterday. There was a little activity yesterday, but people came and were surprised that the military found the time and opportunity to help the residents. They were very pleased and surprised by this initiative.
The points of invincibility often operate with help from the Ukrainian military.
This is the situation. Once Kyiv residents actively helped and donated to the military, and now the military has come to support Kyiv residents in these difficult times. As you know, the situation is very difficult.
As Ukraine braces for devastating weather conditions forecasted for early February, another batch of Polish power generators is set to reach the war-torn country on Thursday.
A recent spat over Greenland has thrown the Arctic's growing strategic importance into sharp focus. While Russia and China have been steadily expanding their influence in the region to boost both economic and strategic leverage, Western policy is only now beginning to catch up. Experts, including former NATO Supreme Allied Commander General Philip Breedlove, warned that the alliance must answer Russia's challenge in the Arctic.
An ice-cold warning from NATO's former Supreme Allied Commander.
We need to make improvements. Russia understands force.
General Philip Breedlove told TVP World that the alliance must answer Russia's challenge in the Arctic. It comes as the region's security moves sharply into focus in the wake of US President Donald Trump's aggressive rhetoric and stated desire for Greenland to become a part of the United States.
Recent events confirm that the situation in Greenland is a strategic wake-up call for all of Europe regarding the assertion of our European sovereignty, our contribution to Arctic security.
In Germany, the country's defense minister is also calling for a stronger military presence in the Arctic and the North Atlantic.
The Arctic, once a blank spot on the strategic map, today is a projection screen for global power claims. Russia and China in particular are becoming increasingly robust here. We must and will intensify our efforts in the High North and the Arctic. That goes without saying, and we already began doing so years ago.
Neither China nor Russia are hiding their ambitions in the Arctic. China declared itself a near-Arctic state in 2018, and in 2024, Beijing and Moscow launched a joint Arctic patrol, underscoring their deepening cooperation. Russia controls roughly half of the Arctic's land and waters, and has by far the largest footprint among Arctic nations, with more than 40 military facilities along its northern coast, including bases and airfields. In fact, Moscow maintains 2 settlements on Norway-controlled Svalbard. And while a 1920 treaty grants Oslo sovereignty, Russia repeatedly exerts diplomatic pressure, questions the island's legal status, and builds up its military through exercises in the Barents Sea.
Russia doesn't recognize that Russia has no intention of sticking to these laws. Their track record of breaking every agreement they've ever made is nearly perfect. And so we need to anticipate that and prepare for that. And yes, there's more than Svalbard. There are other islands that we're worried about that Russia could go out there and seize, and now we have a problem.
Further west, Donald Trump is keeping his hopes high for a deal to take Greenland, forcing Denmark to push for a permanent NATO presence on and around the island, including a so-called Arctic Sentry operation.
The Greenlandic government and the Danish government have asked NATO to be permanent present. My hope is that we will have something you can almost like copying Baltic Sentry to the Arctic region.
The proposed mission would mirror NATO's Baltic Sentry, launched last year with frigates and maritime patrol aircraft to protect critical infrastructure, following multiple Russian acts of sabotage in the Baltic Sea. It would also resemble Eastern Sentry, launched along the alliance's eastern flank in September after a Russian drone incursion into Poland.
It's day 2 of the state visit of the King and Queen of Denmark to Lithuania. Today, issues range from defense and energy security to bilateral friendship and even sports. Let's go live to our correspondent Don Arlev, who is in Vilnius for the visit. Good afternoon, Don. So how is the day shaping up so far?
Well, so far we kicked off the day with a business forum, the Lithuanian-Danish Business Forum, and that was opened up by President Gitanas Nausėda, who talked about, of course, the various parallels that Lithuanian and Danish businesses have, and of course it comes as no surprise that the main priorities are, of course, energy security and defense. Now, we heard at this conference, we've seen a very big transformation here in Lithuania. About a year ago, they cut their grid off from the Belarusian nuclear power plant on the other side of the border and have built interconnectors to Poland and what have you. But the push for green energy and renewables, they want to become self-sufficient by the end of the decade, and Danish businesses will be a large part of doing so. Now, another thing that we saw there at that summit was defense companies. A lots of anti-drone systems. Of course, we know that this is becoming an ever greater threat, especially in a country like Lithuania that has constant airspace violations from Belarus. Now, a lot of those we're starting to experience in Poland with these smuggler balloons coming into the airspace, and here in Lithuania has caused multiple airport closures. So we see there's definitely momentum. Of course, NATO is spending much more money right now, and the demand to pick up that industrial base seems to be taking hold. I'm here in front of the Lithuanian parliament. I just spoke to some lawmakers about the whole situation, and particularly the Arctic. And I just heard that last report talking about how NATO has to take very seriously the security in the Arctic. And of the many, many private conversations that I've had here in Lithuania, I haven't yet to hear a single voice that dissents on that matter. Of course, everybody says the Russian threat is there, it's going to be there, and of course this security vacuum in the Arctic is something that needs to be had. We know that most likely the Danish delegation, together with their Lithuanian counterparts, are discussing these matters. However, we've yet to hear any official statements so far, but a press conference should be taking place very soon. We'll see if we get those comments for a later service. Now back to you.
Arlef reporting from Vilnius. Thank you for this update. It now looks like two oil refineries in Central Europe will soon change hands. Their current owner, Russian Lukoil, has been forced to sell off its overseas assets because of US sanctions. In the meantime, local governments have stepped in to ensure uninterrupted operations. Here's full story.
Russians didn't expect this move. Late October last year, the US blacklisted two major Russian oil companies, Lukoil and Rosneft, to punish Moscow for waging war in Ukraine.
Suddenly, the US announced sanctions against our two oil companies. In connection with what? I can honestly tell you that I did not even understand what was happening.
Lukoil got the shorter end of the stick. It had to sell its international assets, including stakes in oil fields around the world, more than 5,000 petrol stations in 20 countries, and a couple of oil refineries, including two in Central Europe. The Bulgarian government responded with putting Lukoil's plant in Bulgaria into state administration to ensure uninterrupted flow of gasoline and other products.
We received a warning about the suspension of payments from several Bulgarian banks, as well as all bank cards and transactions with the assets of the sanctioned entities. This necessitates adequate, fast and urgent measures, which we undertook at the earliest possible moment.
Politicians in Sofia can sigh a relief now, as the American private equity group Carlyle agreed to purchase Lukoil's international assets, barring the ones in Kazakhstan. The acquisition is not yet complete, as it must be approved by the US government, which previously halted sale to an energy trading firm Gunvor with a single tweet calling Gunvor Kremlin's puppet.
And now the latest from the world of sports. 13 Russians and 7 Belarusians have accepted invitations to compete as neutral athletes at the 2026 Winter Olympics in Italy. They will not, however, have the right to take part in the opening ceremony or any team events. Jonathan Carter has this report.
The qualification requirements for those neutral athletes are the same as those applied for the Paris 2024 Games. One key condition is that neither the athletes nor their support personnel may have actively supported the war in Ukraine. Russian and Belarusian athletes will not be permitted to take part in the opening ceremony or any team events. Medals they win will not count toward any national standings, and no Russian or Belarusian flags, anthems, colours, emblems, logos, or any other national symbols will be allowed. Russians have qualified in 7 disciplines, including cross-country skiing, where one of their most prominent athletes, Sevely Korostelev, has secured a spot. Belarusians are entered in 5 disciplines, including freestyle aerials, featuring Hania Huskova, the 2018 Olympic champion and 2022 silver medalist in that event. The Winter Olympics begins with the opening ceremony on February the 6th.
And with this, we conclude our update. Thank you for watching, and please stay tuned for more here on TV.